Well, it's like when the world lost its mind over Moneyberg.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, who gives it? Like, why do we care about this? This does not affect me in any way whatsoever. Just like my neighbor's grass doesn't affect me. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I do not care.
Just like your training partner's abilities don't affect
Right.
you.
And so when you're in here on the mats and you're training, if somebody is performing at a level that I would like to see myself at, then that should just be incentive.
That's a vicarious experience to develop self-efficacy.
Yes.
Welcome to the Second Plan A podcast, where we take hard-earned lessons from the mats and convert them into tools for navigating life's challenges. I'm Amber Hoover. I'd rather stick to the plan.
Wait, is this real?
This is like, yeah, we're on. We're going. We're not testing.
Okay.
He's Ryan Hoover. He frequently deviates from the plans and loves to watch me squirm.
I don't have plans, so there's no deviation.
Deviating from my plans that I told him, but goes how it goes. All right, let's move on to our second plan A.
Okay.
On this episode, we are questioning the system that profits from keeping us under pressure. We explore how constant stress shows up in training, in life, and in the choices we stop believing we're allowed to make. This podcast is based off your article titled Life Should Be About the Right Things.
Okay.
So, this won't be too long at all.
I write a lot of articles, so
I know this one's already
I might need some more prompting.
Well, let's start off in 1817.
I know I didn't write that.
After the Industrial Revolution, most workers were putting in 80 to 100 hours per week. And it's this time frame, 1817, that activists and unions are advocating for better working conditions. In 1866, so still another 50 years later, the National Labor Union asked Congress to pass a law mandating an 8-hour workday, and it did not pass. But it did increase public support for the change. A few years later after that, in 1869, President Grant guaranteed 8-hour workdays for government employees, which then encouraged private sector workers to push for the same rights. Finally, in 1886, so another 20 years or so later, the Illinois legislature passed a law mandating 8-hour workdays. And it seemed like that would be the start of a new standard. However, many employers refused to cooperate, which led to massive worker strikes in Chicago. And there was a bomb at that point, killed at least 12 people, came to be known as the Haymarket Riot. It wasn't until 1926, another 40 years after this event in Chicago, that Henry Ford, now we're in more of the Ryan Hoover realm, that Henry Ford is credited with popularizing the 40-hour work week. He conducted research that proved that working more only yielded a small productivity increase that lasted for a short time. He announced he'd pay his workers $5 per 8-hour working day, which was nearly double what the average auto worker made at that point. And it would be looked at as a stroke of brilliance for boosting productivity along the assembly line and building a sense of company loyalty and pride. So that was 1926. In 1940, that's 123 years after the post-industrial revolution workers advocated for better working conditions, is when the 40-hour work week became law in the U.S. All right. My biggest takeaway from this is you can change a system, but it takes a long time. And the people who start trying to make the systemic change usually don't see it change.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think there's plenty of examples of that. And I think that's pretty universal. It's funny because I just wrote an article about kind of slamming Gen X a bit.
Wait, slamming Gen X?
Mm-hmm. So now I know that she doesn't read my articles.
I didn't read this recent one. I just assumed that it was yay Gen X, and I didn't want to hear how terrible millennials were. All right, well, I'm going to go read that one now.
There's only like one line in there, I think, about how crappy you guys are.
Oh, okay, good.
But it's a lot about how I feel like Gen X has failed in bringing about systematic changes, being unwilling to engage, being kind of too cool for school to actually get involved, because it does take generationals kind of shifts before you see anything substantive when you're talking about like major systems, which labor would be a major system, government, whatever. I think, and that's that's why it's hard to get people organized, because we mostly recognize I'm going to do all of this work. I'm going to push back. I'm going to maybe bring on some kind of retribution, and I'm never going to see the benefit of this. It might be 2 or 3 generations later that that is going to benefit from it, and I'm either not going to be involved in whatever the system is anymore. Or I'm not even going to be here.
Yeah.
And so I think more often than not, we're just trying to get through our day to day, and thinking about changing a system for 2 or 3 generations down the road, that kind of gets pushed aside.
Well, especially with how fast things move nowadays with technology.
Yeah.
The idea of something taking hundreds of years is so much less palatable than it maybe was couple hundred years ago.
Yeah.
Because we've seen things move so quickly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think if a kid today trying to look at TikTok through dial-up,
yeah, would not
would throw the phone.
Yeah.
Like it just, and we're only talking. I mean, that's a relatively short amount of time since we've gone from dial-up to fiber, or satellite, or whatever. But we very much live in a fiber world, a microwave kind of society where we want things here and now. And the thought of putting in a lot of work for something that we're not going to see the benefit of, I think is just not palatable to most people. But like for me, beyond the 100-hour work week kind of thing, which, if people that are watching that are small business owners, recognize that a 40-hour work week probably isn't super realistic. But that's what we signed up for. That's what we took on. But I do think that people with an entrepreneurial spirit kind of relish that a bit, and can get to a point where they recognize, all right, there's a way to do this where I am putting my time and energy and resource into things that I actually love and enjoy beyond the work.
Hustle culture is starting to change.
Yeah.
Where it used to be grind and no balance.
Right.
It started to become, you can work hard, but you can still take vacations, have weekends off, go work from your resort in Cancun or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And still being called hustle culture.
Yeah. My concern there is, and I think we've seen some of this, is that we, just like we do in everything else, we go too far the other way.
Yeah, I was going to say, the pendulum is swinging.
And we have these, I forget what they're called, micro retirements. I'm like, what?
Oh yeah, something
like that. I forget what it's called.
Yep.
I'm like, no, bro, that's just a vacation.
Vacation.
Like that. What are we talking about
There
here?
was,
like,
this is what he's saying is real. There was an article that we read about micro retirement, and it was, I don't remember which generation, but they were taking a week off, and it was like, no, that's
vacation.
That's vacation. That's
but,
5 PTO.
I mean,
days
the funny thing about that is I was having because we're doing a lot of travel this year.
Yeah.
We didn't really travel much last year, but this year we have a lot, and I was having a conversation with somebody recently about the travel and how, in the past it's been, all right, I'm going to get the 2 days. Maybe I've got a day of travel, but it's going to be 2 days. I'm seeing an airport, a hotel, and a training center, and that's it. And for several of these trips this year, we've allotted additional time to go and see and do things. And, I said something to somebody, and they were like, I said, it's going to be nice to be able to go somewhere and actually just see things and hang out and whatever. And they're like, you mean a vacation?
You're like, oh.
I'm like, oh, I guess. Yeah, maybe.
It's weird because even though you're in a new country or a new area and going to explore something, it's not like it all kind of still exists back here, and that's small business, and that's having an ownership mentality.
Well, and I think, yes, and I think it's a lot harder these days because with internet and social media and whatever, you feel compelled to answer everything that comes in within a relatively short period of time, again, because of we have this instantaneous kind of yearning for responses, information, whatever. So I think it's even more incumbent upon people in the workforce small business owners, whatever, to regulate that, create some sort of boundaries to where, look, if I get an email at 1 a.m. on a Saturday night, I don't have to respond to that right now,
I had to lock my apps because I was bad about. I would jump into my Gmail just to check it real quick and delete some spam so that
Yeah.
on Monday it wasn't bogged down. But then you see something and you're like, oh, let me respond to that real quick. And
Yeah.
it doesn't work.
No.
I do think so. If I had to make a prediction, we've moved to some instantaneous responses. And I remember as I entered the workforce, my employer had, I believe it was a 24-hour response rule for emails, 24 business hours kind of thing. I do think at some point that will be funny to the generation that's working. And I don't know if it's going to go like 2 hours to respond or 2 weeks to respond.
Yeah.
My inkling is for the latter. I think at some point email is not going to be expected to have a response within such a short time frame. I think it's going to be a much longer, it's going to almost turn into what mail is today.
Yeah, I think is it Gen Alpha?
Yeah, that's teens about right now.
I think we're going to see a shift with that group more towards almost a Gen X kind of approach to life in general. A little bit more resilient, a little bit more independent, a little bit more pushing back against kind of systems and norms and whatnot. What I hope for that generation is they don't do like what I feel like Gen X has done, and that was the article that I wrote recently, is take that and then become the kind of generation where it's like that mindset and mentality is mistaken for apathy.
Yeah.
And you kind of take this, I just want to be left alone kind of an approach. And what you don't recognize and what you don't understand, and what I think Gen X should understand now, is just because we wanted to be left alone doesn't mean that people left us alone, and so as we disengaged from, especially in the US, the national conversation, the people around us did not. And when we took the kind of whatever mindset or the leave us alone, the independent kind of thing, what we didn't account for was that the people that weren't Gen X were gobbling up every opportunity they could to create systems that benefited them, to build organizations and communities and political machines and whatever that shaped kind of the direction of the country and the conversation. And now, we're in our, I guess, late 40s, late 50s, and looking around, and it's like, well, we didn't get a seat at the table because we walked away from the table,
Yeah. Well, and, systems start taking on a life of their own because they have been created to serve themselves and they almost build in their own fail-safes.
Yeah.
And this is a weird parallel, but I remember when I was in business school doing accounting classes, and we had to take a tax accounting class or something.
God,
of the sort.
everything you
And
just said.
I know, it was terrible. It was awful. But literally, here was my takeaway from this class. We created this tax law. The next year, people found ways to evade it and get around it, and so then we had to make a law to fill that hole, and then they found ways around that, and so we made a law to fill that hole. And now it's just this huge, complicated thing. It's created its own industry because you have to pay someone to tell you how much you have to pay the government, even though the government knows how much you should pay them. And it's like,
and if they get it wrong, it's not their problem.
Nope.
Like, you literally have to sign paperwork that says, hey, we did the best we could. But if the government says we screwed up, that's on you.
It's on you. Yeah.
I don't know. I think that
this whole episode, by the way, is going to be a lot of I don't know, and this sucks, and
the systems, like, it's easy. And I wrote another article that was basically like, I don't think the system's broken. I think the system is doing exactly what it was designed to do.
It is. They are.
You know.
Yeah. The problem is
us.
Yeah.
We have either directly contributed to it, or, like with Gen X, I think we've so disengaged from it that we've just allowed it to happen. And that's a choice. And I think we're seeing kind of the result of that now. We're left to the devices and the vices of the people that didn't disengage, that recognized they were opportunists, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's where we are.
So I want to connect that directly now to the topic of this episode, which is paying to exist.
Okay.
And I think this was the beginning of your article where it was, we are the only creatures on this planet born here that pay to live here.
Yep.
And we've created that.
Yeah.
We've created where we have to pay to just exist.
Yeah. I sent an article to you yesterday. There's a bar slash club and restaurant in Nashville that we really like called Acme Feed and Seed. And the article that I ran across yesterday basically said that they're probably going to have to close, that their property tax was going from, which the property tax number that they were already paying seemed
insane. Yeah.
batshit to me, but they were going from paying a little over $100,000 a year in property taxes to $600,000.
It went up $500,000.
And this is a building that's 100 years old.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
And
they've been in it for decades.
Yeah. And so you're paying $600,000 a year to simply exist, you know? And yes, we can get into, well, that you got to pay for the streets and you got to pay for the police and the fire and blah, blah, whatever. Yes. But to have a $500,000 a year increase, you know? And so, yeah, the idea that we pay, I mean, we're on about 25 acres. And it's land that's been in my family for 50, 60 years, maybe a little more. So it's been paid for a very, very long time. And we pay every year simply to exist. And, you know, we're in the country. So a lot of the things that you would say we would normally benefit from, you know, I mean, we're serviced by a volunteer fire department, you know, the roads are maintained by the state, you know, we don't have city water, we don't have trash pickup, you know, these kinds of things. And so the idea that we have to put in 40, 60, 80 hours a week to pay to simply
be where we are
is, if you really think about it, wild. Yeah. You know,
I try not to think about it too much because it's wild.
And look, I'm a capitalist, but I'm a capitalist because that's the system that we live in. And I feel like it's the best of what's out there, you know,
it's
because at least I have some say over how I'm going to live and how my family's going to live and whatever. Whereas if it's a communist country, for example, I don't have a whole lot of say in that, you know, the ceiling is set by somebody else.
Choosing our suffering is one of the freedoms that we do appreciate. I'm going to combine all of this and kind of push it back to the foundry idea that we talked about. It was episode 37, The Edge of Pressure. And we talked about having the right amount of stress on you and how there's meaningful stress, but then there's also artificial difficulty that gets added. And, you know, we talked about kind of adding stress to training, but we didn't really hit on the baseline of where we start, because there's pretty much no one starting at zero. We're paying to live on this planet. We have to pay for our food. Our attention is literally sold, you know? And so our beliefs, our interests are capitalized on. And again, not hating on the capitalization. That's part of what, you know, we're on both sides of it. We are paying to get your attention as well on the other side. But it means that living comes with stress and tax on your body and who you are. And then we do something as difficult as contact combat sports and add more stress, and, you know, it changes how you show up on the mats or for your family.
Well, I mean, most stress that people deal with on the day-to-day is self-induced. You know, are there these pressures from the systems? 100%, absolutely. But then we multiply those by thinking, all right, well, my neighbor just had a new landscaping company come in and their grass looks amazing, so now my grass needs to look amazing. And, you know, they just bought a brand new car for their 16-year-old, so now I need it. Like, if humans, and we had this conversation recently, if humans made decisions based on logic, then we would all drive a Toyota Camry.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we would all drive what is universally seen as, or a Honda Accord,
Yep.
these super reliable, efficient, economical vehicles that are going to last for 2, 3, 400,000 miles if we just take care of them. But I guarantee you, if we walk out in this parking lot right now, we're going to see all sorts of cars that are many, many, many times more expensive than that. And look, I'm not judging it. I'm just saying, we as humans, when you buy that car that's more than what some people pay for their house, that's self-induced. I mean,
Yeah.
we did that to ourselves. If you make a ton of money and that's not a car note for you, it's you paid cash for it or whatever, okay. But again, what's the sacrifice for making that ton of money? Are you
have this great car,
doing things that you enjoy? Are you getting time with your family? Or is it, well, I'm on this grind and, you're looking around and I got to keep up with this and that and the other. And I want to make sure that, my kid goes to school with the brand new shoe, whatever it is. End of the day, probably your kid just wants you to go outside and throw a ball with them.
Yeah. If you're not defining your values well, none of what you're doing even really matters.
And I'm saying all this as somebody that recognizes that I didn't prioritize probably in the way that I should have when I was starting business or businesses.
Yeah.
I'm not standing up here saying this is what everybody else should do because this is what I did. I'm saying this is what everybody else should do because
it's not what I did.
It's not what I did, And I do think that for the most part, when you start a new business, I mean, you don't really know what that's going to look like. You don't really know what that's going to entail. You can go to all the business schools in the world that you want to. Half the time, the classes are being taught by somebody that's never owned their own business. So it's all theory until you actually step out there and do it. And I think you do the best you can with the information that you have at that time. And then it's a lot easier to look back 10, 20 years later and be like, oh, I should have done this and that and the other. But there's no way to know. Yes. There's no way to know that.
Yeah. And if you wait until you know it or think you know it, you're never going to do anything.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's like people that 55-year-old, 60-year-old dude goes out and buys a brand new Corvette. Oh, it's a midlife crisis. No, he can now afford it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying there's not some element of that, but for the most part, he didn't buy that car when he was 25 because he couldn't afford to buy that car when he was 25. Yeah.
On that note of cars, and kind of going back to what you said about making just purely logical choices and taking emotion out of it, it's still you don't almost have time to make the best decision. If you tried to do all the research you needed to buy the most perfect car for your needs and your priorities, you'd spend forever searching and researching.
Yeah.
Maybe less time now with AI, but it would still take you a while. I mean, I think I make smart choices with cars, economical. I'm not necessarily looking for one thing or another. I'm not paying extra to have the right color. Although if I had the money, maybe I would, but I bought a car with a class action lawsuit that was out on it that I didn't know until my engine decided it was done.
Yeah.
And then you find out, there's still we all have just this limited amount of time. And so there's always going to be a trade-off into what you're investing your time in.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, the comparison side of adding our own stress to it. And you were focusing on, neighbor's lawn, what kind of things. But if we take that onto the mat now and you go, man, I feel like I'm here all the time and Sarah comes to class once a week and she's crushing it and she's doing so much better. Well, but that doesn't have anything to do with you. And you don't know what Sarah's life is like.
Right.
Maybe she's not working right now and, she's being supported by someone else, or, maybe her work life is suffering and tanking and who knows what's going on and where the balance is, or who's there more or less, and what kind of workload and stress they're adding to themselves, and if they care about their neighbor's lawn and their lawn. And so,
well, it's like when the world lost its mind over Moneyberg.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, who gives? Why do we care about this?
Yeah.
This does not affect me in any way whatsoever. Just like my neighbor's grass doesn't affect me. I don't care. I do not care.
Just like your training partner's abilities don't affect you.
Right. And so when you're in here on the mats and you're training, if somebody is performing at a level that I would like to see myself at, then that should just be incentive
That's a vicarious experience to develop self-efficacy.
Yes.
I don't remember our self-efficacy episode, but it was strong.
Right. But I don't necessarily know. It's kind of like the neighbor with the new car. I don't know what their starting point was.
Yep. Yeah.
You know,
What's your
did my
baseline?
neighbor with the
Yeah.
new car, did they inherit $10 million from their grandfather? Like, I don't know. And ultimately it doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference. So if I'm my training partner that has been here for less time than I have, but also they wrestled in high school, you know, like,
Yeah.
or they're just more athletic, or they're just, you know, they pick up on things It's like there are people that math is their thing, right? Well, there are people that jujitsu is their thing. Like, that's just how it is.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that the way that some people have attributes that are intellectually kind of charged, that also works in athletics. You know, I mean, look around. Most of us are not going to be in the Olympics. You know, like,
Yeah.
there are people that are just going to perform at a higher level, maybe faster and maybe always, but it has zero effect on my growth, you know, my experience, unless I allow it to. And that's what happens. You know, we start to perseverate on the things around us and the people around us, and not on the things that we actually have some sort of control over.
Yeah. Well, it's almost easier to look at things we can't control because there's no onus then on us to do something about it.
And that's why it happens.
Yeah.
You know, if I spend all of this time on things that I have actually no impact on whatsoever, then I'm not forced to actually spend time on the things that I can affect change.
Right. That sounds a lot easier. Let's do that.
Yes.
We talked about comparing skills against others. We looked at artificial difficulty versus meaningful stress, how no one's starting at zero. Everybody has something going on, and it might not be manifesting itself in the same shared space that you're in with them, but it's maybe manifesting somewhere else. And so remember, there's a whole story to this 1 hour that you spend with this person, and you're mostly not gonna know their story. Okay, so let's talk about neuroscientist Robert Sapolsky. He wrote a book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And it was essentially how your fight or flight system is not designed to be engaged long term. Zebras are mostly chilling, hanging out, cool. And then when they're faced with a predator, that system hits and they run for their lives, they escape, they do what zebras do. And then when the threat is gone, they go back to living their life, being cool. Does that sound right? You're the animal person. I'm trusting the neuroscientist, but
yeah, I think in general that's pretty accurate.
Zebras aren't then like, okay, well, now I need to make sure I'm making enough money to pay to live here, to drink the water that I'm drinking, to eat the grass that I'm eating. They just.
I mean, they're going to have to recognize that, okay, well, this time of year water is going to be more scarce, you know, so we're going to have to travel to get water, or to get grass, or whatever it is. But it's not. It's a recognition of probably an unconscious one, you know, if we're talking about actual zebras, but it's a recognition of this is the way it is, you know, as opposed to this is something that I have to perseverate on.
Yeah, they don't, because this is how it goes. And there's that innate kind of ability for them to recognize it.
Yeah.
It almost like, if I had to give it a comparison towards humans, we know as it hits the colder months that it's going to be colder outside and that we're going to have to choose warmer clothing. That's not something I stress about. Oh my gosh, it's 30 degrees this morning. What am I like? It's colder. I wear warmer clothes.
Right.
But
what we do as humans is we put on this coat and we're like, oh, I wore this coat last week. I wonder if I should get a new coat so it doesn't look like I'm wearing the same coat as I wore. You know, like these artificial kind of things. Nobody it's the meme about, like, guys can wear the same thing every day and nobody cares anything about it. And, you know, if a woman wears the same dress twice in a month kind of thing, guess what? I promise you no guy cares about that either. You know, that's a self-imposed sort of stressor that, in this case, women, you know, have a tendency to do.
Yeah. And not all women, not all men, but by and large. So the kind of link that I want to create here is there's a dependence that comes with trying to conform and meet social requirements and cues, and that creates this required compliance. But if you feel more free to have your own decisions and make your own choices because it works for you, it reduces that dependence that forces you into this cycle. There's a freedom that comes with the capability to choose if you allow it to be uniquely your own.
Yeah. Well, I think some of this comes with just we've reached a point, and I understand that different parts of the country, different parts of the world, especially this is not going to be true for, but different demographics. But we've reached a point where it's almost too easy, so we invent these issues and problems and
artificial difficulty.
right. Whereas a zebra just recognizes, I need to eat, I need to sleep, I need to keep moving. I'm not worried about what my neighbor has or doesn't have, or I don't care about what the wildebeest is doing. Like,
I heard a zebra doesn't change its stripes. I couldn't help it.
All right, thanks everybody.
No, we haven't even touched. I don't know wherever I'm talking about now. This compliance, this making things more difficult, creating a system that we have to now comply towards. When we look at this in students performing under pressure and having some type of capability to respond, this comes from the coach creating confidence in their students so that they have the freedom and the tools that they need to win, rather than waiting on you to tell them exactly what to do. If we take this over to the mats, how you could teach somebody in a way that makes them rely on you and depend on you, or you can teach them in a way that they can start problem solving on their own.
To me, that's the difference between an instructor and a coach. And I'm not necessarily passing judgment one way or another. I think there's pros and cons to both. But especially in our world, when we're talking about self-defense, I think an instructor's impact is very limited when it comes to real world kind of efficacy for the end user. Me just being able to get up there and do a really good demo and then break something down into pieces for 20 people all the same way, I think is super limited, and it's going to probably be beneficial to a small amount of people in that room that can actually take that and do something with it in reality. And most people are going to parrot it in the class, but then it's not going to leave with them. It's not something they're going to have ownership of. And I think a coach has the ability to recognize, I need these people to not need me. And it's hard. It's not an easy thing to do. It's much easier to get up and say all you have to do is. And again, like, most students at least think that's what they want. I don't know what to do. You're the expert. Just tell me what to do.
Tell me what to do.
But I don't think that actually prepares somebody for dealing with violence. And I think a coach is better equipped to do that. But it's a lot of trial and error, and it's a lot of, on the coach's side, figuring out what works best for different types of people, because I'm not reading from a manual. I'm not approaching this from a syllogistic kind of standpoint where it's just A, B, C, D, E, F, G, frequently asked questions, common problems, and we keep it moving, because that's just not how humans tend to work in reality.
There's a phrase in business, a word in business. I think it exists across industries, and on the surface, it sounds really great because it sounds simple and easy, and that should be a red flag for you. But the word is turnkey. And when you find something that's turnkey, it sounds like it's about to free up all your time. It's going to be so easy. You're going to be able to implement it, and that's true. However, there's a huge cost on the other side of that equation. If you're not creating your own program, your own system, your own routine, practices, whatever it is, and you're opting for this turnkey thing, it's not optimized for you or the end user. So, it sounds good on the surface. And I'm sure there are some things that should be turnkey, but there are some things that really shouldn't. And if you don't identify the correct one, you're doing a big disservice to the students that you're coaching.
If you're running a 1,500 member center in Los Angeles, that's going to be very different than if you're running a 75 member center in Lowell, North Carolina. Like,
And if
I
you
don't,
both buy the same turnkey
I don't care what
system,
anybody
yeah.
says. You know,
Yeah.
it's like you sent me a video recently, somebody saying nobody should be charging under, I don't remember what the number
It
was,
has
but
like 175 a month or something.
but I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
how
do you
can
know
you
that? How can you
actually
say
say
that?
that? You
Yeah.
know, like markets, even our own, like we have 2 training centers and these markets are vastly different. They're 45 minutes apart. They are vastly different. And so when you start talking, those are huge red flags to me when somebody says something like that. I'm like, this is somebody, because in that case, you've never worked outside of the market that you're in right now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so how can you tell somebody on the other side of the country, this is what you should not be charging less than this? Well, based on what? What are you
Yeah.
basing that on?
Right.
You know? Or, okay, well, here's our turnkey kids jujitsu program. It's X amount of dollars and you go implement it. Well, here we have a rotating curriculum, you know, and jujitsu is part of that. But how do I make that work for me, you know, in my center? Is it really
It's
turnkey
not actually
now?
turnkey.
You
Yeah.
know? Or if you're a Taekwondo training center and you want to add ground stuff to your program, do I have to abandon everything else I'm doing, you know,
Yeah.
to do this turnkey jujitsu program for kids?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, when you say turnkey, to me, that means it will work as is for everybody.
Yeah.
And there are just so few things like that.
Yeah. One size fits most.
Yeah. In business, I think that's really hard to do. That's why like affiliations and licenses and stuff like that are tough, because everybody wants the easiest thing to implement, but then they also want the customization of it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like,
Well, and once you, let's quote unquote turn that key and you've implemented it for 4 months, and now you're like, okay, well, what next? Now what? And if all you did was, all right, this is what they said to do, so this is what we're doing, and now
Right.
you're like, well, now what?
well,
Anyway.
I mean, we run into similar. I mean, if we take our grounded program as an example, you know, there are levels.
Yeah.
And if you're going to implement just the first level, then you should expect an attrition rate,
attrition,
you know,
yeah.
because people are going with anything.
Yeah.
We're talking about adults, you know, and if as an adult, I'm trying to figure out how to allocate my time between my family and my job and the things that I enjoy to do.
That's true, yeah.
Well,
And I'm not hating on turnkey, but it has its
no,
cost.
no.
And I
Just
don't
like
mean like
anything
your,
else,
your number, but
there's going to be a trade-off regardless. You know, the advantage of a turnkey is generally it's going to be less expensive because you don't have the customization that, you know, so it's like, well, like for me, if I was going to buy a turnkey kind of system, a program, I would understand that I'm going to get this thing and then I am going to customize it for
my
us.
demographic, for how we run our classes.
Right.
For,
but that's not what most people think or want. Most people are like, I don't want to think about this.
Tell me
what
exactly
to do.
what to do. Just like they are. It's funny because like students, the
It's
next
just
level up
it's
as
just
coaches, as owners.
it's just how humans are.
How humans are. Yeah. Hate that
Which is
for
why
us.
we end up with systems
that
you know, and the people that
serve themselves.
yes, because the people that can think beyond that are going to set up the systems for them. They are going to customize for them, and then you're going to be stuck with whatever they come up with.
Wasn't ready to come back to systems right there like that, but boy, did it hit. You're right. No, it is what it is.
And then the further problem with that is, and this is with any kind of regulatory body, organizations, governments, whatever, and you kind of mentioned this with the tax code earlier, is they have to continually justify their existence, which means they are going to continually be tweaking things, and you know, and it's never going to be in your favor. You know, unless you're actively involved and you are playing a role in shaping how things go, they're always going to game the system for them and theirs. It's just the way it is. And so that's how you end up with a tax code that a normal person cannot read. And that's how you end up with tons and tons of laws and regulations and whatever, because as a government body, I remember when there was a Congress called the Do Nothing Congress. And my kind of thought about that was awesome. Great. I don't want them to do anything.
Yeah.
You know, because if a lawmaker is doing something, it is making laws.
Yeah.
Well, what do laws do? Laws restrict the people that are under them,
Mhm.
you know? And so a do nothing Congress to me is fantastic because I don't
I don't
want
want you to
more
do anything. We don't need
laws.
more.
I don't want
Yeah.
more restrictions. I don't,
Yeah.
again, Gen X, leave me
Leave
the
me
fuck
alone.
alone. The problem is they're not going to. And if you don't engage, you're going to be stuck with whatever they decide. And that's where we are.
So I want to jump from this point to a book called Tools for Conviviality by Ivan Illich. Have you heard of this book before?
Nope.
I haven't either. I have it on my read list now. He lays out this threshold in developing any tool, and it would apply for developing systems, developing a lot of things, really. And he calls it the 2 watersheds. Essentially, the first watershed has great benefits, whatever you're creating. This first step has great benefits. And then you come up at some point against the second watershed where the benefits are used to justify manipulation of some sort, adding this barrier almost to access. In terms of coaching, the first watershed might be a coach enters your life, you come to a gym, and they help you get safer, stronger, more capable. The second watershed can come in if that coach becomes indispensable. You aren't willing to trust your own judgments. You ask them, they need to give you permission to do something. And so you stop trusting your own judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And now this tool that was a great thing, this coach that was helping you develop these skills, this strength, whatever it is, has become a required part of it.
Yeah.
GPS is another great example.
Yeah.
GPS gave us the freedom to move about on our own until we stopped having the ability to navigate without it. And now we're relying on it.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked recently about stuff going on in the jiu-jitsu world, and the idea of grooming and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about, I think can happen unintentionally. It can be from a coach's perspective. I want to help these people. I want to do more. They are coming to me for this, and I think it can be at least surface level well-intentioned. But ultimately, if my goal is to make this person self-reliant, independent, able to make decisions in real time under stress, then I'm not really doing that. I'm not really helping them. And so as a person in any kind of position of leadership or authority or whatever, I think you constantly have to remind yourself of this and reframe and have people around you that can help reinforce this, because it's really easy to be put on, we talk about this in coach development courses. It's really easy to be put on this kind of pedestal and not even recognize it as it's happening when it's happening. And then that just kind of becomes self-perpetuating. Then, it happens with one person, it happens with 2 people, it happens with 10 people. And, next thing you know, it's like, that's just who you are and what you know, and all of a sudden you're some kind of guru or some shit and life coach. Like the number of people in our industry that teach martial arts or whatever that are all of a sudden also life coaches, I'm like, based on what, like why are we doing this? What's happening? Own your space, man. Like you're a really good jiu-jitsu instructor, or you're a really good Krav Maga coach, or whatever it is. Just be that. I don't. There are plenty of therapists in the world. Like we don't need martial arts therapists.
No, but I do think even therapists have a job to watch the line too, and
Sure.
not move into this life coach, like, because you don't want this person depending on you
Yeah.
to tell them what to do in their life.
You don't want to jimmy them.
You don't want to jimmy them. Like
If you're not watching Shrinking on Apple TV, I highly recommend Shrinking. Really well written, great acting. Jason Segel, Harrison Ford, a handful of other people that are really, really talented. Brett Goldstein from Ted Lasso is, I think, a writer and executive producer, has a role in it as well. It's a really well done show. The overall premise is, these folks are all therapists, and Jason Segel's character becomes pretty involved with his patients, to the point where he moves one of them into his house and things like this. So that's the reference.
Yeah. I mean, it actually does show a lot of these points where it shows a lot about the stress people
Mhm.
are dealing with and how it manifests in different places, how it's important to be open and honest. The last podcast, can't remember if I cut it out or kept it in. You were dealing with some things for your grandma, and
Mhm.
a text alert went off, and you kind of apologized. You're like, sorry, I'm dealing with some things, and I was able to cut it out anyway easily. But if I couldn't, I would have left that in,
Yeah.
because like, we are real people with real lives, with
Right.
real stressors, with real things going on.
Mhm.
And this is important. You guys are important, but our family are going to take priority and precedence.
Mhm.
If you got a call right now and you had to answer it and run to a hospital, like, we'd be done podcasting.
Yep.
That's it. And this
Yep.
is what we'd release.
Yep.
Anyway, so a lot of great examples in that as well, in terms of how you can want to protect somebody and help somebody and take it too far.
Yeah.
Too far. One of the references I have on my notes is building calluses. You can't give someone calluses for them. They have to do the work. You could protect their hands, but that's not going to build the resilience they need and the calluses they need. And so you see very directly where too much protection can lead to fragility.
Right. I can buy you a pair of gloves.
Yeah.
But
that's not actually helping you.
Right.
That makes you reliant on this thing or me to get you the equipment that you need to do this thing, or whatever it might be.
Yep. Your
fancy back rack squat bar or whatever it is. I'm going to end with a quote that is from your article. A meaningful life is built by people willing to reject the pressures designed to keep them small, and who are willing to fight for a world their kids won't have to recover from.
Yes.
Ryan Hoover.
Yeah, and the Gen X article that I just wrote kind of alludes to more of that. I think ultimately, in 30 years, 40 years, I won't be here, and the world won't know the difference, But as a collective, and this is where I think Gen X got it wrong. Gen X looked at it as, I'm independent, I'm going to do my thing. You go do your thing,
If you need those systems, okay, fine,
right.
But I'm not gonna. Yeah.
And we never really learned to organize and use community to protect the independence that we wanted,
Right.
And ultimately it'll be our kids that suffer for that. And so being able to create something that our kids don't have to recover from, and being able to recognize how to spend our time and how to allot our resources. Parents are not, I have a responsibility, I think, to leave the world better than I found it. Otherwise, what are we doing? Like, if the zebra doesn't have all these stressors and things to worry about and whatever, literally just survive. And I'm not trying to diminish that, because there are people in the world that literally are just trying to survive. But for those of us that aren't, and we're spending all this time and energy and money on these things, to what end? For what reason? Because, and it's super cliche, but you can't take it with you. So, all right, fine, have the Mercedes, have the Porsche, whatever. But on your deathbed, who's going to give a shit about that? In your obituary, are they going to talk about the nice cars that you drove? Is that what's going to be on your tombstone?
Yeah.
And so I would rather leave my kids a world they don't have to recover from than leave my kids a fucking Cadillac Escalade.
Yeah. And we all have to make those decisions for ourselves. And
oh yeah,
yeah.
Listen, as a true Gen Xer, I want people to live how they want to live.
Yeah.
But then understand that there are consequences to how we want to live. Whatever you choose, whatever direction you go in, there's going to be a ripple effect of that, And am I okay with the outer limits of those ripples,
As best as I can tell and imagine and think. And look, this isn't like an either or kind of thing. You can
both and.
Yeah, you can live the way you want to live and make the world a better place, make better choices so that your kids don't have to recover from just living.
Yeah. I constantly, and maybe this is undue stress that I'm putting on myself, but I constantly think about the world that will exist after me.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I feel like I have some great capacity to do anything about it, but because I feel like as a species, we should collectively think more about that. Think more about the world that we are living.
Like guiding theme in my life of giving the world my all, doing everything I can in the time that I have to make the world a better place, leave it better than I found it, even if it's my 3-foot radius type thing.
Yeah.
That's our look at life without an off switch. If you enjoyed this discussion, leave us 5 stars, follow, share, subscribe, do all the things. It really helps to have your engagement. Thank you for those of you who have been commenting on Spotify. Really appreciate it. If you did not enjoy this podcast, Instagram seems to be the place for comments. As one writer wrote that he's never seen anyone in a professional capacity be asked something that's outside of their scope.
Yeah. Did he delete that comment?
I don't think so. I think it's still there.
Okay.
That was a fun one. Like, you've never lived.
Yeah.
Actually, your response was okay.
Yeah.
Because I was like, that's not real.
He's either lying or he actually has never done the job.
He's never.
It's one or the other.
Yeah.
Anybody that has done anything remotely close to what we do for any sustained period of time has experienced that.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to Second Plan A, and we look forward to growing with you next time.
Thanks, everybody.